When you walk into a kitchen, any kitchen, you experience something far deeper than just a room with appliances and countertops. You feel an energy, a visceral response, an immediate knowing whether this space could be yours or whether it belongs to someone fundamentally different from who you are. But here's what most people never realize. The kitchens that make your heart skip a beat, the spaces that feel like they're calling your name before you've cooked even a single meal inside them, they're not about cooking preferences or design trends. They're mirrors, reflecting the deepest architecture of your psyche, showing you exactly who you are beneath every social mask you wear, and more importantly, revealing the version of yourself that's desperately trying to emerge. Your kitchen preference isn't about food preparation. It's about how you organize your entire existence, how you create meaning, how you establish control or surrender to chaos, how you nourish yourself and others at the deepest psychological level. The kitchen that pulls you, that creates a physical sensation in your chest before logic can explain why, contains coded information about your relationship with nurturing, with productivity, with perfection, with authenticity, with visibility, and with your right to take up space in ways that serve your actual needs instead of performing for invisible judges. And before we begin, I need you to do something essential. Stop thinking about resale value, about what impresses guests, about Pinterest boards, about trends, about what seems practical or age-appropriate. Instead, look at the 4 kitchen styles I'm about to show you and notice which one makes you want to stay. Which one feels like it's speaking a language you've always understood but never heard spoken aloud? Which one whispers that if you cooked inside it every day, something fundamental about how you experience yourself would shift? Your body knows before your mind can construct explanations. Trust that knowing. And if you're ready to explore the unconscious patterns that determine not just how you cook, but how you live, how you relate, how you express yourself, and how you claim your right to exist fully, hit that subscribe button now, because this channel dives into the hidden psychological territories that shape everything you think you're consciously choosing. And what's coming next will fundamentally transform how you see yourself. Each kitchen represents a distinct psychological architecture, a different way your unconscious mind organizes safety, creativity, control, expression, nurturing, and identity. Some speak of minimalism and rigorous order. Others embrace maximalist abundance and sensory richness. Some create sanctuary from external chaos. Others generate creative friction that feeds your soul. The space that captured you isn't an aesthetic preference. Something inside you recognized itself before consciousness could question why. Your unconscious chose before your social conditioning could redirect you toward what seems acceptable. Now, I'm about to reveal something that will fundamentally change how you understand your relationship with your own life. But first, let's explore what it means if the first kitchen stopped you in your tracks. If the minimalist kitchen drew you in, that space with pristine white surfaces, clean lines, hidden storage where every appliance disappears behind seamless cabinetry, where countertops remain perpetually empty, where even the dish soap is decanted into matching containers, where nothing unnecessary remains visible, then your psyche is desperately seeking relief from cognitive overload, from decision fatigue, from the exhausting weight of managing too many things, too many choices, too many inputs competing for your limited attention every single moment right now. This kitchen belongs to people who experience the world as relentlessly overwhelming, who register stimulation more intensely than most people around them. What others barely notice, the visual clutter, the competing textures, the mismatched objects, the accumulated stuff, these things drain your energy, fragment your focus, leave you exhausted without anyone, including yourself, understanding exactly why. Your nervous system isn't broken or overly sensitive. It's simply processing more information more deeply, which means you need your environment to compensate by offering less. The empty countertops aren't about some obsessive need for control. They're about creating external conditions that allow your internal world to finally settle, to find its natural rhythm, to stop defending against constant sensory assault that feels like static electricity across your consciousness. When you look at this kitchen, something inside you exhales completely. The mental chatter quiets. The tension you've been carrying in your jaw and shoulders releases. You can finally think clearly because there's nothing competing for your attention, nothing demanding you notice it, process it, categorize it, decide about it. People often completely misunderstand your preference for emptiness. They think you're cold. They think you're afraid of warmth or personality. They think you're performing some Instagram aesthetic that prioritizes appearance over function. But they're absolutely wrong. You're not removing things because you don't value them. You're removing them because each visible object carries psychological weight, demands attention, pulls at your awareness, consumes processing power you need for things that actually matter. You're choosing what stays with exquisite care, keeping only what genuinely serves your well-being, releasing everything else, no matter how expensive, how beautiful, how sentimentally significant, or how much someone else thinks you should want it. Your relationship with this space mirrors your relationship with life itself. You don't want more, you want better. You don't want bigger, you want deeper. You don't want to accumulate, you want to distill everything down to its essential truth, to find the core that matters and let everything else fall away, without guilt, without second guessing, without wondering if you're missing something everyone else can see. The hidden storage reflects your need for systems, for knowing exactly where everything belongs, for never having to search or wonder or make the same decision repeatedly. You're not being rigid, you're conserving your limited decision-making capacity for things that actually deserve it, for choices that matter, for questions that don't have predetermined answers. The matching containers, the coordinated elements, these aren't about aesthetics. They're about reducing cognitive load, about creating patterns your brain can process automatically without conscious effort, freeing up mental resources for creativity, for deep thinking, for actually being present instead of constantly managing your environment. Sometimes you feel guilty about needing less when consumer culture insists happiness comes from having more. You wonder if something's wrong with you, if you're missing some capacity for enjoyment that others naturally possess. But there's nothing wrong. Your brain is simply wired to process more deeply, which means you need to input less to maintain equilibrium. You're not missing anything. You're honoring your actual neurological reality instead of pretending to be someone you're not. And now, there's something profound about this preference that connects to a deep pattern in how you were raised, something that explains why you feel so responsible for managing everything so perfectly. But before I share that, make sure you're subscribed, because we're going much deeper in upcoming content, and what's coming will illuminate everything you've been feeling but couldn't articulate. The minimalist kitchen appears in your life when your system is overloaded, when you've absorbed too much, processed too much, carried too much, when your psyche needs to purge excess and return to simplicity. Right now, you're not just organizing physical space, you're reorganizing your entire life, removing toxic relationships that drain more than they nourish, simplifying complicated commitments that serve everyone except you, eliminating activities that looked good on paper but feel empty in practice, creating boundaries where none existed before. You're learning that saying no to everything non-essential is the only way to say yes to what genuinely matters. You're discovering that your energy is finite, precious, worthy of fierce protection, that you don't owe anyone access to your attention, your time, your processing power, your care. The message of this kitchen is both simple and revolutionary. You don't need to adapt yourself to environments that overwhelm you. You need to create environments that support your actual nervous system, your actual needs, your actual way of processing reality. Stop apologizing for requiring simplicity. Start honoring it as the foundation of everything else you're trying to build. If the rustic farmhouse kitchen captured your imagination, that space with open wooden shelves displaying mismatched dishes, vintage containers filled with wooden spoons and well-worn utensils, a large farm table as the centerpiece, perhaps exposed beams, hanging pots and pans, copper accents, fresh herbs growing in mason jars on the windowsill, everything visible, everything telling a story, everything touched by time and use, then your soul is calling you back to something authentic, something rooted, something real in a world that's become too polished, too perfect, too performative, too disconnected from actual living. This kitchen is never chosen by someone who's comfortable with superficiality. It belongs to people who crave depth, substance, history, connection, who are exhausted by the relentless pressure to present curated, perfect versions of themselves that bear no resemblance to the messy, beautiful, complicated reality of actual human existence. Walking into your inner world would feel like walking into this kitchen, warm, layered, full of stories, impossible to understand all at once, every element carrying meaning, history, emotional resonance, nothing arbitrary, everything belonging because it represents something true. People drawn to rustic farmhouse kitchens are rejecting the tyranny of perfection, that exhausting performance of having everything together, of maintaining surfaces that never show wear, of presenting a life that looks effortless when the reality is constant invisible labor to maintain the illusion. Your inner world has always valued authenticity over impression, substance over style, but you've been performing perfection because that's what seemed required, because admitting struggle felt like failure, because showing the wear and tear of actually living felt shameful. The open shelving speaks to your psychological shift toward visibility, toward showing what's real instead of hiding everything behind closed doors. You're tired of concealment, tired of pretending, tired of the energy required to maintain perfect facades. You want to live in a way where what's visible matches what's true, where you don't have to remember which version of yourself you're supposed to be performing, where the mess and the beauty coexist without apology. The mismatched dishes, the vintage elements, the things worn smooth by use, these reveal your relationship with time, with history, with honoring what came before instead of constantly chasing what's new. You understand that objects gain meaning through use, through being part of your life, through carrying memories embedded in their surfaces. You're not interested in replacing things just because something newer exists. You want to live with things that have stories, that connect you to your own history, that remind you where you came from. The large farm table as centerpiece, this reveals your deepest value: community, gathering, nourishment that's about more than food. You want your kitchen to be the heart of your home, where people naturally congregate, where conversations happen, where connection deepens, where you feed not just bodies, but souls. You're not interested in pristine showpiece kitchens that no one actually uses. You want a space that shows evidence of living, that welcomes people, that prioritizes function and warmth over impression. The fresh herbs growing, these speak to your need to participate in living processes, to nurture, to witness growth, to have your hands in soil, connecting you to cycles larger than human drama. You don't want everything pre-packaged, sanitized, disconnected from its source. You want to know where things come from, to participate in their becoming, to honor the miracle of transformation that happens when you actually cook instead of just assembling pre-made components. And there's something crucial about this choice that explains exactly why you're feeling pulled toward simplicity, toward authenticity, toward rejecting the performance you've been maintaining. But I'm going to share that in just a moment, so stay with me, because what's coming will make everything suddenly clear. But first, if this is resonating, if you're recognizing yourself in ways you haven't seen before, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed, because we're exploring these territories regularly and you won't want to miss what's coming next. If the professional kitchen grabbed your attention, that space with commercial-grade appliances, gleaming stainless steel surfaces, professional range with multiple burners, extensive counter space for preparation, everything designed for serious cooking, for precision, for performance, for creating at the highest level, then you're living a powerful combination of mastery, ambition, and uncompromising standards for yourself right now. This kitchen represents excellence without apology, capability without limitation, space designed not for casual dabbling, but for serious, dedicated practice of craft. It speaks to people who approach everything they do with intensity, with commitment, with a drive toward mastery that most people simply don't possess. You don't do things halfway. You don't dabble. You don't just go through motions. When you commit to something, you go deep. You study. You practice. You develop real skill. You pursue excellence not because someone's watching, but because operating below your capability feels like suffocation. You value competence above almost everything else. You can immediately assess who knows what they're doing versus who's performing knowledge they don't possess. You recognize mastery when you see it, respect people who've put in real work to develop real skill, and you have limited patience for people who want results without effort, who expect praise for mediocre work, who confuse confidence with competence. This heightened sensitivity to skill and mastery makes you excellent at what you do, but it also makes you intolerant of spaces that limit your capability, of tools that don't match your skill level, of environments designed for people who approach things casually when you need to approach them seriously. The commercial-grade equipment speaks to your refusal to compromise on capability. You're not interested in appliances that look impressive but perform inadequately. You want tools that match your skill, that won't limit what you're capable of creating, that respect your commitment by offering equivalent commitment to quality, function, precision. You're willing to invest in proper equipment because you understand the tools matter, that your environment either supports or constrains your capability.
The extensive counterspace reflects your need for room to work, to spread out, to have multiple processes happening simultaneously without feeling cramped or limited. You don't work in neat, linear progression. You work in layers, in parallel processes, in complex orchestration that requires space, both physical and mental, to execute properly. The stainless steel surfaces, the professional aesthetic, these aren't about showing off. They're about function, about surfaces that clean easily, that don't require precious energy maintaining them, that let you focus on the work instead of managing the workspace. You respect efficiency. You eliminate unnecessary steps. You design your environment to support your process instead of fighting against it. People who choose this kitchen often possess what psychologists call high conscientiousness, that quality of being disciplined, organized, achievement-oriented, and holding yourself to rigorous internal standards. You don't need external motivation or supervision or accountability. You have your own internal drive, your own standards, your own definition of excellence that likely exceeds what anyone else would demand of you. But this intensity has costs. Sometimes you judge yourself brutally for normal human limitations. Sometimes you push when you should rest. Sometimes your high standards make it difficult to work with others who don't match your level of commitment. Sometimes you're so focused on mastery that you forget to actually enjoy the process. And now there's something important about this choice that reveals exactly where you are in your development, something about what you're building and why it matters so much. But before I share that, make sure notifications are turned on, because what's coming in future videos will deepen everything we're discovering here. If the Bohemian kitchen captured your soul, that space with colorful, mismatched tiles, open shelving displaying collected treasures from different places and times, plants spilling from every available surface, vintage pieces mixed with handmade objects, patterns and textures layering in ways that shouldn't work but somehow do perfectly. No regard for matching or coordinating, just pure, authentic expression. Then your unconscious is telling you something vitally important. You're done performing coherence. You're done editing yourself into something digestible. You're done pretending you're simpler than you actually are. This kitchen is never chosen by someone who thinks in straight lines or lives within conventional categories. It belongs to people who experience reality as endlessly fascinating, who see connections others miss, who find beauty in unexpected combinations, who understand that rules about what matches or coordinates are just limitations imposed by people afraid of authentic complexity. Walking into your mind would feel like walking into this kitchen. Rich, layered, overwhelming at first, until you start seeing the deeper patterns, the internal logic that connects everything in ways that make perfect sense once you understand the organizing principle underneath. People drawn to Bohemian eclectic kitchens possess what depth psychologists call psychological integration, that capacity to hold contradictions, to embrace complexity, to refuse to amputate parts of yourself just because they don't fit together neatly in ways others can immediately comprehend. Your inner world has always been this rich, this contradictory, this impossible to categorize, but you've been presenting a more coherent exterior because that's what felt safe, because the real complexity invited confusion or judgment or people deciding you were chaotic when you're actually operating from a different organizing principle entirely. The colorful, mismatched tiles speak to your rejection of uniformity, of predetermined packages, of being told that everything must match to be acceptable.
You're creating your own aesthetic, your own logic, your own definitions of what belongs together. And you're doing it based on what feels true rather than what looks coordinated. The collected treasures from different places and times, these reveal your relationship with experience, with memory, with honoring every phase of becoming instead of erasing your history to present a more consistent narrative. Each object represents a different moment, a different version of yourself, a different discovery. And you're not trying to resolve them into false coherence. You're letting them coexist, showing the actual complexity of a life fully lived. The abundance of plants speaks to your need for living, growing, organic elements that don't follow predetermined patterns, that surprise you, that remind you life is inherently messy, creative, unpredictable, and that's not a problem to solve. It's a reality to embrace. You don't want sterile control. You want vibrant aliveness, even when that means occasional chaos. The mixing of vintage and handmade, the layering of patterns, these elements reveal your comfort with ambiguity, with both and thinking, with refusing to choose between things that supposedly can't coexist. You're analytical and intuitive, serious and playful, traditional and experimental, all at once. And you've stopped apologizing for refusing to resolve into something simpler, something easier for others to understand, something that makes sense to people who need everyone to fit into neat, predictable boxes. And here's what's crucial about this preference. There's something this kitchen is telling you about why you've been feeling so constrained lately, about what's trying to emerge. But I'm going to reveal that after you take one important action. Subscribe right now. Turn on notifications, because what's coming will show you exactly how to honor this complexity without getting lost in it. Now, here's what nobody tells you about these kitchen preferences. They're not just revealing who you are. They're revealing what developmental work you're doing right now. What aspect of yourself is ready to be honored? What pattern you're transcending? What new way of being is trying to emerge? The minimalist kitchen appears when you're learning boundaries, when you're discovering that less really can be more, when you're releasing the exhausting burden of managing too much. The rustic farmhouse shows up when you're returning to authenticity, when you're done performing perfection, when you're ready to show the beautiful, imperfect reality of actual living. The professional kitchen calls to you when you're claiming your capability, when you're done apologizing for your intensity, when you're ready to build something that matches your actual skill instead of diminishing yourself to make others comfortable. And the Bohemian eclectic emerges when you're integrating, when you're bringing all your contradictory parts into conscious relationship, when you're ready to present your full complexity without apology. Your kitchen preference is a message from your unconscious, a blueprint showing you exactly what you need right now to support your becoming. If you chose minimalism, create those boundaries fiercely. Protect your processing capacity. Eliminate without guilt. If you chose rustic farmhouse, embrace imperfection. Show what's real. Let people see the actual texture of your life. If you chose professional kitchen, invest in yourself properly. Demand tools and space that match your capability. Stop diminishing your intensity. If you chose Bohemian eclectic, stop editing yourself. Let the full complexity show. Trust that the right people will understand the internal logic even when it's not immediately obvious. Your kitchen knows something you might be just beginning to consciously understand. And before you go, I need you to do something essential. Comment below which kitchen chose you. Not for me, but for yourself, and for others who need to see they're not alone in their needs, their preferences, their way of organizing their world. There's tremendous power in claiming your truth publicly, even in small ways like this. If this exploration cracked something open inside you, if you recognized yourself in ways you've never articulated, if you're hungry for more journeys into the unconscious territories shaping everything you experience, then subscribe immediately. Turn on notifications. Share this with someone who's struggling to understand why their environment feels wrong, why they can't settle, why nothing feels like home. Sometimes the answer isn't finding the right space. It's understanding your actual psychological needs and creating environments that honor them. Your kitchen has spoken. Now it's time to listen. Now it's time to honor what it's showing you. Now it's time to build your life around your actual nature instead of fighting against it.
And that's where everything changes.